Number 10. Earth 3. The post-Flashpoint Earth 3 is similar to its pre-Flashpoint Earth, but way better. This Earth is the birthplace of evil. The mentality here isn't good versus evil, it's more like just evil. Strength is respected more than anything else, with the weak basically being annihilated. Instead of the Justice League, Earth 3 is home to the Crime Syndicate of America, whose members include Ultraman, Superwoman, Owlman, Power Ring, Johnny Quick, Sea King, The Outsider, Grid, and John Johns. Earth 3 was reintroduced in 2013 and has played a part in Darkseid War in 2015, Dark Knight's Death Metal in 2020, and in 2021 it was reborn again in the Infinite Frontier story. Like I said, when we started, the DC universe is complicated, but what's remained the same since 2013 is that some of the coolest stories come out of Earth 3. Number 9. Earth 1. Earth 1 and the number 10 pick are probably the oldest of the Earths and universes on this list. Earth 1 first appeared in 2008 in its New 52 form, but it introduced a whole spectrum of readers into the DC universe, and sales for its comics were through the roof. So I believe it deserves a spot on the list. Here, superheroes are all younger, and they all just started their superhero careers. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, the Teen Titans, and Green Lantern all have graphic novels that take place on this Earth, and they are all just fresher takes on the almost overdone superhero origin stories. With the characters all being younger, it was also very easy for younger readers to relate to, and gave the characters conflicts that they wouldn't have faced as their prime Earth counterparts. Number 8. Injustice Universe. The Injustice Universe of Earth 22 is the universe in which the events of the Injustice video game and its related comics take place, and it first popped up in 2013. So here in the Injustice world, Superman went a little bonkers. After the Joker tricked Supes into killing both Lois Lane and her unborn child, plus unintentionally blowing up Metropolis, Superman murdered the Joker and eventually became a tyrannical ruler of Earth. The Batman of Injustice creates an insurgency, eventually enlisting the aid of another Earth, Earth 1 of this reality. With the alternate Earth's help, he overthrew Superman's regime and rebuilt the world. And that's all just part of the first game. Number 7. The 53rd World. The 53rd World, named by the smart primates who live there, was a world unknown to the rest of the multiverse. It's set in a near future where presumably the world is inhabited by super smart apes, like Planet of the Apes style. Oh, and also, immortality was achieved in 2067, meaning that yes, all these ultra smart apes are immortal. We know that there exists alternate ape versions of Superman, Batman, the Atom, and Aquaman. The existence of this Earth was first revealed in 2018's Dark Knight's Rising: The Wild Hunt, when Detective Chimp was beginning to lose his intelligence. The ape heroes show up, recruited by Raven, Cyborg, and the Flash to help with the dark multiverse, saying they were here to help. Obviously. Detective Chimp, accompanied by the apes of the 53rd Earth, plus Flash, Cyborg, and Raven, go to help Earth Zero's Justice League fight the dark multiverse forces. That's kind of all we know about the 53rd Earth. I want more super apes! Number 6. Archive of Worlds. The Archive of Worlds isn't so much an alternate Earth, it's actually an artificial multiverse which contains pocket dimensions in the form of film reels. Now that's just kinda nuts on its own, but then take into account the fact that it was created by a mad god, Artur-io, who is the god of tales, who is jealous of the new god of tales, which is the internet. It's pretty nuts. He tried to steal the new god's soul and was instead encased in a Wayne Tech satellite where he created the Archive of Worlds. First appearing in Batman/Superman Volume 2, number 16 in 2021, the pocket dimensions include a world where Superman never came to be, as well as one where Batman never came to be, a world based on hell, a western world, a world based on the life of Alana Strange, and so many other unnamed worlds. Artur.io eventually was cured by Batman, and he instead became Observer.io, which is a lot nicer. Number 5. The Linear Verse. The Linear Verse is an alternate reality where the people age so slowly that it's almost safe to say they don't age at all. Batman began his career in 1939, with his youth lasting for decades instead of the normal aging of a human. In a way, this kind of represents how comic book characters seemingly never age and grow old. except in certain stories. By the late 20th century, the world had most of its superheroes. After this point though, things get a little whack. See, Earth became a dystopia ruled by the wealthy, which, I don't know, it seems a bit too real for me. And a great disaster was foreseen that actually came to pass. And the world became very similar to the one in the Earth AD story. Anthropomorphized animals had become the rulers of the planet, with humans devolving, save for Kamandi and a few others. Then, in the 25th century, humanity seemingly built a high-tech society, which saw the rise of Michael Carter, who is Booster Gold. In the 31st century, Earth became the base of the Legion of Superheroes, who were an interplanetary superhero team. This world is just a wild ride. Oh, and it first appeared in Generations Forged #1 in April of 2021. Number 4, the Metalverse. Okay, I know we're going to talk about the Dark Multiverse, but we haven't talked about, and we need to talk about, the Metalverse. So basically, after Perpetua defeated the Justice League, she gave Prime Earth to the Batman Who Laughs. He and his Dark Knights defeated all the heroes and then reshaped the Earth into his vision. Look at this super cool map! He turned Gotham City into a whole continent super city that is guarded by Joker dragons. He made his home Castle Bat, which is another version of Batman who became a sentient Gotham. There is a hell on Earth called the Hellscape, ruled by Wonder Woman. Arkham Wasteland, ruled over by Harley Quinn. A Superman-powered New Apokolips prison where all the remaining heroes are held. Megapocalypse with a Rainbow Valley where all the lantern rings lay because no one is worthy that exists anymore. This version of Earth Prime isn't exactly an alternate universe, but it definitely sounds like it should be. Hey nerds! Just wanted to say thanks for watching. It means a lot to us. If y'all don't mind smacking that like button, it would help us out. And it helps YouTube know we don't suck. Okay, on to the top 3. Number 3. Green Lantern Legacy. Green Lantern Legacy is a one-shot comic from 2020, in which we are given an alternate Earth where the Green Lanterns of Earth were John Stewart, who we already know, and a Vietnamese woman named Kim Tran. Now, Kim Tran, like most of the Green Lanterns, was an awesome hero who never let evil escape her sight, in brightest day or blackest night. She was a pillar for her community too, helping people from all walks of life. And she even helped other Vietnamese immigrants feel at home in this new city. The comic, though, really follows Tai Pham, who is Kim Tran's grandson, as he takes up the mantle of Green Lantern from his grandmother, becoming one of the youngest Green Lanterns at 12 years old. We see him struggle with racism, bullies, his own fears, and against the Yellow Lantern. It's a great story, and it gives some well-needed Vietnamese representation to the DC landscape. Give it a read! Number 2, Deceased. You know how Marvel has the Marvel Zombie storyline? Well, this is basically DC Zombies. That's a bit of an unfair comparison though. The two stories are very different, with the DC version ultimately being slightly more grounded and emotional. In this reality, Cyborg has been captured by Darkseid on Apokolips, and it's revealed that the anti-life equation lives inside him. When Darkseid tries to take the equation, it is instead corrupted, causing Darkseid to explode Apokolips. But not before Cyborg was sent to Earth. Once he arrives, he inadvertently infects the entire world with the anti-life equation, which has taken the form of a techno-organic virus. This turns millions of people and a lot of metahumans into zombies. The story follows the survivors as they try to quell the threat, and eventually leave the Earth to settle a new home. I kind of prefer this to the Marvel Zombies story. I don't know, it's a survival story instead of a funny zombie story. I like it. Sue me. Please don't sue me. Number 1, Dark Multiverse. First appearing in Dark Knight's Metal #1 in 2017, the Dark Multiverse is basically the shadow version of the regular DC universe that resides underneath the primary one. So there are negative versions of the 52 Earths of the regular multiverse, but it was also originally the World Forge, meaning it has so many more worlds. For example, there are worlds born from sentient life's hopes and fears. Honestly, each world here could take up a point on this list, but it feels like that's cheating a little. The World Forger was the master of this domain and created the Great Dragon, Barbados, to destroy unstable realities that couldn't join the Orrery of Worlds. Barbados, manipulated by Perpetua, rebelled and defeated the World Forger, creating the Dark Multiverse. A lot more happens after that, but I can't cover that in a 1-minute segment, so Dark Knight's Metal is an amazing story and it deserves your reading. Number 10, Batman vs. Bigby. You know Batman, but have you ever read or heard of the Fable series? It's one of my favorite comic series. It basically follows classic fairy tale characters living in modern day New York. The Big Bad Wolf, otherwise known as Bigby Wolf, is the sheriff of their community. In 2021, we got the limited DC Black Label series Batman vs. Bigby, a wolf in Gotham, which is a collaboration between these two comic worlds, with Bigby as a main suspect for murders in Gotham. If you like the Fables world and you like Batman, you'll love this little mashup. Number 9. JSA, The Liberty Files. The Justice Society of America, The Liberty Files, was a DC Elseworlds story from 2000 to 2003, which makes it non-canonical. Any story that lets writers go outside the rules of the DC canon always makes for stories that I personally love. Alright, so what's it about? The series took characters from the JSA, but turned them into covert government operatives in World War II. Specifically, the story centered on 3 heroes: Batman, called Bat, Hourman, called Clock, and Dr. Midnight, called Owl. I know, really creative names. The 3 were known as the Unholy Three, and their mission, at least in the Part 1 story, is to find Jack the Grin, who is the Joker, who has information about the German weapon Übermensch, or Superman. Are you sold yet? Number 8. Earth 15. Earth 15 first appeared in 2007 in Countdown number 30. This Earth was basically a perfected Earth with heroes who evolved to become nearly perfect beings, with most of the proteges like Jason Todd, Donna Troy, Zod, and Kyle Rayner taking over the original heroes' roles. That is, until the events of Flashpoint, when it was destroyed by the crazed Superboy Prime. That little rascal. The still existing dimension became a graveyard universe, eventually being modified by Hal Jordan into an Earth whose heroes had personalities opposite to the Prime Earth versions. It's an interesting place for sure, and some interesting things have happened in it. Check it out. Before we go on to number 7, I got something to tell you. You're great. You guys keep hitting that like and subscribe button, you're making me blush, my goodness. Keep up that support, it helps us bust out more and more of these videos for you lovely people. Alright, moving on. Number 7. Earth 20. Earth 20, which appeared in Final Crisis Superman Beyond number 1 in 2008, is the home of Kent Nelson, otherwise known as Doc Fate. And he is so cool. Basically, he leads a society of superheroes on Earth 20, which is a group that includes Lady Blackhawk, Immortal Man, the Green Lantern, the Mighty Atom, and Batman from time to time. The history of this world isn't exactly very well known, but we do know it has just come out of a war that is somewhat like World War II. There are Zeppelins flying around in some cities, and the cars are all big and beautiful. It's got a very slick 20s style. The heroes of this world would do righteous battle against a society of supervillains from Earth 40 in a huge 5-year war. My goodness. Number 6. Batman White Knight. I cannot recommend this 2017 story enough to you guys. It is an insanely interesting and fantastic Joker story. It takes place in an alternate Gotham City, and the Joker regains his sanity after a brutal and violent forced ingestion of a medicine by Batman. The roles are practically reversed, as the seemingly reformed Joker, real name Jack Napier, becomes the White Knight, hoping to better Gotham City as a politician, while also condemning Batman as an unhinged violent vigilante. Which, I mean, it's kinda hard to argue against that point of view. He sued the GCPD for police brutality, and he worked against the 1%, who used Batman and Gotham's crime for their own financial benefit. Joker actually becomes a good guy. It's kind of insane. But there is more to this story, and I highly suggest you check it out. Number 5. Earth 14. Alright, this is gonna be a pretty quick one. There is not a whole heck of a lot of information out there about Earth 14, which first appeared in Superman Volume 4, number 15 in 2017. I want to talk about it because the Justice League of Assassins is just the coolest looking version of the Justice League I have ever seen, even if it was just for a short period of time. The Assassins are made up of alternate heavy weapon bearing versions of Wonder Woman, Batman, Harley Quinn, Flash, Aquaman, what looks like it could be Green Lantern, and Superman. They only last about 3 pages of the comic they are a part of, but I really hope we see them pop up in other stories because these guys are just so rad. All we saw them do was fight a bunch of gatherers in a post-apocalypse looking Earth. Number 4. Batman 89. Okay, you can fight me in the comments about this one. Batman 89 was published in 2021, but the stories take place in the Tim Burton Batman movies world. Seeing how we haven't actually seen a comic in this world, I'm gonna take this one, okay? Cool. So yes, this is that Batman and Bruce Wayne in this comic. He has the same suit from the movie, the same amazing Batmobile, and it takes place after the events of the movies, but it's more like comic heavy. It's really, really cool. We see Harvey Dent actually become Two-Face, Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman is back, and we even get a Robin for this universe. It's so awesome. I don't want to spoil too much, so you can probably guess what I'm gonna say. Go give it a read. Number 3, DC vs. Vampires. The ongoing DC vs. Vampires limited series that started in 2021 is such an amazing story. It just makes sense. Pit the characters of the DC universe against a growing army of vampires, a mystery around who the superhero vampire leader is. It's great! The basic premise, without spoiling much, is that Mary, Queen of Blood, who upholds the peace between vampires and humans, is dead. Whoever killed her also killed the Legion of Doom, and has made a plan for vampires to take over the world. Andrew Bennett, a vampire, went to the Justice League to tell them about the army of vampire supervillains. There's a vampire Gorilla Grodd, like, come on. The story has a large Batman and Bat family presence, as a story about vampires should, and for a story so grim, it actually has some really funny moments. Especially from Damian Wayne, as I'm sure no one is surprised by. Number 2, DC Bombshells. DC Comics Bombshells is an awesome story from 2015 that focuses on a reality where a team of female superheroes fight on the side of the Allies during World War II. It actually first came to be because of a line of statuettes released by DC with superheroines wearing retro 40s inspired costumes. They were so popular that they moved to variant covers, and then they got their own series. Each hero has their own style and story, while still all being part of this bigger, wider alternate World War II story. It's truly awesome, and mainly follows Batwoman, Wonder Woman, Supergirl, Stargirl, Zatanna, and the Batgirls. Go give it a little gander, would you? Number 1, Dark Knights of Steel. And now for my favorite. Dark Knights of Steel. Swords, sorcery, superheroes. Dark Knights of Steel is a story that actually came out this year, that's 2022 if you're watching this from the future, but is set in an alternate medieval fantasy universe. Batman is an actual knight and half Kryptonian. Like, I'm just in love. Okay, so basically, Jor-El and Lara escape Krypton before it is destroyed and crash land on the medieval Earth, and eventually become the rulers of the land after giving birth to Kal-El. It's wild. There are alternate versions of Green Lantern, Supergirl, Harley Quinn, Robins, Alfred, Constantine, Green Arrow, Joker, Green Lantern, Black Lightning, and more. I love to see comic book publishers do these time-displaced stories. It's great.
Number 10, Speeding Bullets. Basically a multiversal DC Elseworld story that answers the question, what if Superman didn't just have powers but was also rich? That's basically what is going on here in Speeding Bullets. In this story, Superman wasn't raised by the Kents, but instead was taken in and adopted by the Waynes, and he becomes, you guessed it, Bruce Wayne. After the death of Thomas and Martha, Bruce becomes Batman, but the difference is this version of Batman has tech, money, smarts, and superpowers. Lex also becomes a mess of a villain in this world. While still being Superman's nemesis, he's also Batman's nemesis rolled into one, with an extra little dash of Penguin, just for good measure I guess. So here we get a villain who is Lex, Joker, and the Penguin all in one. Oh goody, just what none of us necessarily wanted or needed. And yet, we got it. This also doesn't do much to enhance his motivation for villainy, which, like his identity, is also kind of all over the place. Still, the premise behind this Elseworld story is pretty cool, but unfortunately it doesn't add enough when it comes to offering a twist or different perspective to either the Superman or Batman mantle. Number 9, Batman and Captain America. A gloriously weird and awesome comic. This DC multiversal story also happens to be a DC Marvel crossover issue featuring Batman, his sidekick Robin, and Captain America and his sidekick Bucky. Both Cap and Batman end up joining together and then swapping sidekicks. Their villains also seem to have a team up as Red Skull and Joker come together, but this is also the famous issue the Joker insists that Red Skull is too evil even for him. He may be a criminal lunatic, but after all, he's an American criminal lunatic, and he can't stand by when it comes to abiding by Red Skull's history and motivations. So not only do we get to see some great team-ups, but we also get to see a full-out fight break out between these two iconic villains. Thanks, John Byrne. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you love Elseworld stories and all of the weird, wacky things that go on in the multiverse when it comes to just alternate worlds, let us know by giving this video a thumbs up, and hey, maybe we can do some more Elseworlds lists for you, Cause yeah, there's lots of kooky stories out there. Number 8, the Superman monster. Frankenstein, but make it Superman. There are lots of retellings of classic tales when we look into the realm of Elseworlds, and the story of Frankenstein is not one that is left untouched. Actually, I feel like this story gets interpreted a few times throughout the Elseworlds stories. I feel like I've seen at least 3 different versions of Frankenstein retold in Elseworlds. I still have yet to see Dr. Seuss retellings though in the world of DC, which are some classic kids tales that do eke their way surprisingly into Marvel at times. In the Superman monster, Lex Luthor takes the role of creator and Superman ends up as his monster. You might think this sounds familiar considering it's also kind of the premise for the main continuity origin story of Bizarro, but this creation, while starting out similar to Bizarro, eventually goes full-on hero and full-on Superman by the end of it. That means in this story of Frankenstein, the creator ends up the monster, while the monster ends up the hero. What a twist. Number 7, Justice Riders. Because it's an inevitability that at some point, we have to turn to the Wild West for inspiration when it comes to an Elseworld story. We've gotta go there at some point. And so we have Justice Riders. Justice Riders reimagines the DC universe as existing during the time of the Wild West and adapts the characters to kind of fit their surroundings somewhat. As such, Wonder Woman becomes a Texan-sounding sheriff, and Martian Manhunter gets to sport a poncho and a cowboy hat. Which honestly, this is one you might want to check out just for that, cause that's great. This is the Wild West, baby. There are also plenty of shootouts and bar brawls, some with cyborg enemies involved. As ridiculous as this premise is, I will say it's executed well and it also looks fantastic, so. Number 6, The Reaching Hand. Honestly, what a strange story this one is. It features Batman as an occult detective trying to solve the mystery of Elongated Man's death. Unfortunately, it seems as though Elongated Man wasn't alone in his body, and there was a force of darkness within him who continues to seek to spread gloom and doom wherever it can. This story features a lot of restless nights for Bruce as well, and unfortunately, he ends up too late to save Jimmy Olsen. Not Jimmy Olsen, who ends up brutally murdered by Swirly. At least that's what it looks like to me. He's just head down in the toilet and they're like, he's been murdered. Or he was just being mistreated by the other staff at his workplace, but no, he's dead. Death by Swirly. Bruce also is too late to save his friends or Gotham in the end. At least that's what's implied. This one ends pretty bleakly, so yeah. Also, this is back from when we had like Elseworlds, like giant sizes, so there would be like a bunch of short stories in there. Kinda like What If, and I like that style. More stories though than What If, because those are normally 2. Sometimes only 1. Number 5, Elseworld's finest, Supergirl/Batgirl. You can't go wrong with a jacked Joker when it comes to weird multiversal stories. Looking real jacked, baby! Elseworld's finest is weird but also kind of cool. It focuses on Barbara Gordon and Kara Zor-El, Batgirl and Supergirl respectively, who are guardians of Gotham and Metropolis, as in this world, there was never a Batman or a Superman. The two of them team up to take on the manipulative and traitorous Lex Luthor, and as I said, a really swole version of the Joker. It's a strange one, but it's also kind of a great one. Number 4, Batman/the Demon, a tragedy. In this Elseworld story, we get to explore a horrifying fantastical world where magic exists. Here, Bruce Wayne is not the Batman, instead suffering from an allergy to moonlight. He is a restless sleeper, and it turns out this is because he's actually bonded to the demon Etrigan. Oh my goodness. It takes Bruce a while to figure this out though, but in the end, he is too late to save his girlfriend Glenda. Poor Glenda. The best thing he can do according to Merlin is to wipe his memory, which will also mean he has no recollection of Glenda. Oh no. Merlin claims that this will save her. Unfortunately, it doesn't, as Etrigan taking over Bruce in the nighttime does end up still killing her. But hey, at least Bruce doesn't remember her, which actually seems to have been Merlin's plan all along. You see, in order to keep the demon trapped within Bruce, his forgetfulness is necessary. There is no way to save Glenda really in any case most likely, and Merlin was just saying that to try to get Bruce to, do what he wanted him to do. But hey, at least Bruce doesn't remember her, so at least he won't be sad about it. Number 3, Brotherhood of the Bat. Have you ever wondered to yourself what the DC universe would be like if every member of the League of Assassins was dressed up and also weirdly happened to resemble Batman? No? Me neither. But too bad, because we get to know what that would be like in this Elseworld story. I mean, not even too bad, it's kind of really great in a weird way. Brotherhood of the Bat takes place in a post-apocalyptic future where Ra's al Ghul decides that the League of Assassins, they need some new costumes. New Bat-themed costumes that all very much resemble alternative takes on Batman's outfits. Also, check out some of the notes on Ra's al Ghul's design sketches here. That is honestly my favorite part of this story. Just seeing all these, like there's like little notes in red. It's like, is this cape too much? You can never have too much cape, just so you know. Just so you know, Raish, no such thing. Number 2, Batman Nosferatu. If you want something weird in a sort of horror-based and very artistic way, we've got you. Batman Nosferatu was actually part of an Elseworld story series that delve into the German Expressionist period. This story seems to take some inspiration from Nosferatu and the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Not only is the art style very different and unique, but the whole tone and the style of the dialogue is as well. The story has a lot going on, but mainly it follows the horrors of Dr. Arkham. To give you like the briefest summary ever, because as I said, there's a lot going on in this story, it's also quite long. The story mainly centers around Dr. Arkham and his experiments and creations, including one called the Laughing Man. Oh, I wonder who that's supposed to be. A reanimated creature made from various corpse parts. In the end, Bruce Wayne's son ends up dying and is resurrected as the Nosferatu, sort of cyborg monster creature who ends up taking on and defeating the Laughing Man. I wonder who Nosferatu is supposed to stand for here. Any guesses? Number 1, Batman/Lobo. Like all of the weirdest comic stories out there across the multiverse, this one also features Lobo. Here, Joker hires the mercenary to ruin Batman's reputation and then finally kill his nemesis. Lobo sets out dressed as Batman and begins to muck up the streets, killing Batman's villains in gruesome ways to make sure that people know that Batman is no hero. He's like, what, does Batman have a no-kill policy? Pfft, not anymore. Also, the deaths have to be gruesome because this is a Lobo comic after all, so yeah, they're all pretty... there's something. I don't even know if we can show them here. In the end, the Joker is forced to call off Lobo after it's revealed that Batman is actually his long-lost twin brother, Bruce Wayne. You see, Joey and Bruce were apparently separated at a young age. I mean, does it get any weirder than this? Number 10, Tales from the Dark Multiverse, Batman Hush. I actually really love this story, but it's also kinda out there, especially when you consider it has its own sort of theme song and a very creepy tone. In Tales from the Dark Multiverse Hush, Bruce Wayne is the one who becomes a version of the Hush character. It would be more accurate though to say that he becomes a version of Hush and Batman if they were kinda like combined together. Here, Thomas Elliot instead becomes a rich billionaire playboy and also corrupt senator, allying himself with Talia al Ghul. He manages to make it so that Bruce was locked away in Arkham Asylum. Despite feeling slightly guilty about doing this to his childhood friend, overall Elliot is pretty okay with the way Bruce is imprisoned and treated there. However, after faking his death, Bruce Wayne manages to escape Arkham and becomes Elliot's worst nightmare. And just for a fun fact, he doesn't go by Hush in this one though, he's the Silenced. Shh. Get it? Still like Hush. Number 9, JLA the Nail. This is an Elseworld story that centers around a literal nail. The nail in question is one that punches Martha and Jonathan Kent's tire, thereby preventing them from intercepting and adopting little baby Kal-El, who would grow up to become Superman. Or at least he would have grown up to become Superman if that's what happened. In this world, instead, there is seemingly no Superman. As such, Lex Luthor is successful in making the JLA a band of outlaws. Instead of them being celebrated heroes, they're kind of considered to be somewhat criminal, despite of course their noble intentions. What I will say is at least a lot of this artwork is pretty good. Most of the limited series ends up being kinda dull, save for a few scenes and plot points. The parts that I found the most interesting were one where Selina gets therapy while sexy posing on a desk, another being a fight involving Joker with anti-grav mitts versus Batman, which takes place after Joker has successfully killed Batgirl and Robin. Batman ends up broken as a result of the Joker's actions here. We later learn that the Superman of this universe is basically a very sensitive Jimmy Olsen who is bonded with the remaining traces of Kal-El's DNA found in this crash-landed spaceship. Jimmy doesn't like it when people laugh laugh at him. He ends up in a fight with the real Kal-El, another interesting part of the 3-issue series, who it turns out was adopted by the Amish, hence why he never became a hero, as he preferred to stay within his community. So we get an Amish Superman, and then we also get Jimmy Olsen Superman, but he's pretty much evil. Also, what is that costume he's wearing? Sorry, Jimmy, I didn't mean to laugh at you. Sorry. Alright friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want even more multiversal tales, let us know that you love it by giving this video a thumbs up. And also let us know in the comments what other multiversal tales you have loved or you have thought are super weird, or that you loved and thought were weird. I mean, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. Number 8. Tales from the Dark Multiverse, Wonder Woman, War of the Gods. I don't even know what to really make of this multiversal story. All I can tell you is buckle in, because this Dark Multiverse story is, yeah, dark. To be fair to this one shot though, I don't really even know what to make of the War of the Gods story in the main continuity, which I also found a little confusing, so it makes sense that this is where I would be as well with the Dark Multiverse version. A little confused. In this story, the Amazons of Themyscira end up in a war with the United States. When Diana is pulled into a battle with Hecate as a result of these events, where in the main continuity Hecate was defeated by Wonder Woman's lasso of truth, here she just ends up planting a seed within Diana's mind. Diana defeats her, but only temporarily. Following the death of Hippolyta, her mother, Diana is left weak, fearful, alone, and resentful, and this is when Hecate is able to take over. Unable to free her, all of Wonder Woman's friends die trying to. The only way to contain Hecate Wonder Woman is with magic, and many of her magical colleagues actually die in the attempt to do so. Hecate as such ends up chained, but of course so is Diana, unable to find the hope to escape her own internal prison. Of course, like most dark multiversal tales, we end on a pretty dark and tragic note. But that's okay, Zatanna's never gonna give up. Number 7. JLA Act of God. Admittedly, this is a cool premise, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense, which is what's weird about it. In JLA Act of God, an Elseworlds 3-issue miniseries, we get to explore a world where all the heroes of Earth have simultaneously lost their powers. Well, at least almost all of them anyways. How did this happen? Black light? Somehow the world being hit with a flash of black light results in almost everyone losing their powers. I guess normally superheroes don't go to raves or anything, where black light is, I feel like, very common. Although this is attributed to the black light, some might call it an act of God. A later on, very suddenly, devoutly Christian Diana Prince at least would probably claim that. Diana, haven't you met gods? How does that make sense? What's really ridiculous is in the first issue, as we go through the moment this happened, the world over, we get to see just how diverse not only everyone's powers are, but also when it comes to the source of their powers, just how diverse it is. In one page we go from Steel losing complete control of his systems and suit as he plummets to his doom, to Aquaman losing his ability to connect with the creatures of the sea telepathically and his ability to breathe underwater. At the same time, Kyle Rayner also has lost control of his Green Lantern ring, which seems to now just be, I guess, a really unique and trendy looking accessory. How could a flash of black light affect almost everyone in this same way? Like I said, it's a cool premise, kinda wonky execution though. How is Steel affected by this? Didn't Steel make his suit? I'm confused. Number 6. Facets. What happens when we get to see the Teen Titans as they'd be in a fantasy setting? Well, a whole lot of weirdness. Raven of course ends up evil, known as a deadly and beautiful sorceress, Queen Raven. She creates her own loyal servant and accomplice with Victor Stone, or at least she tries to, transforming him permanently into a cyborg. It turns out this isn't all that Raven's been up to though. She has a whole collection of prisoners whom she has transformed in some way, and when Cyborg refuses to join her, she also contemplates holding him there with the rest of them. So apparently she does this a lot. Seems like her deals with people don't usually work out. I guess she's just hoping that one day that'll change. She's like, I'll just keep doing it. Eventually someone will be loyal to me. If I try it enough times, it's gotta work. In this story, Coriander is a prisoner of some goblin mages who use cosmic energy to transform her into Starfire. The comic features an all-out battle between Raven and Starfire, joined of course by the rest of the Titans. Nightwing goes on a trip inside Phantasm's cloak, literally it looks like he's tripping out, and eventually Trigon joins the party when he is summoned by his daughter Raven. You can check it all out in the 1994 New Titans Annual. It's weird. It's definitely weird. Also, some of these outfits are interesting. Number 5, Superman at Earth's End. I don't even know where to begin with this comic. Oh boy. Okay, so Superman here is one of the first iterations of course, the old man heroes to come that we've come to love so much. See, before there was Old Man Logan, there was Old Man Supes. In this Elseworld story, we are in a post-apocalyptic future where machines rule supreme and mutants basically run amok. Also, there is an army of Batmen and vicious biker gangs because, I mean, why not? The year, I believe, is 2102, so possibly this is what we'll be dealing with in just over 80 years time. Honestly, the way things are going, I could maybe see that being our future. Superman is recharging and recuperating his strength when he hears about the plan to nuke Gotham City. He aims to save the city, but of course without doing any killing, because you know, he's Superman. And of course, no guns, because he's Superman. Except for the part where he uses guns to kill people. Except for that part. Mostly robo and really bad people though, so I guess for Supes it doesn't count. It features the famous "I am a man" memeable moment, which actually was shouted in response to an android, by the way, so out of context it's really weird, but within context it actually like kinda makes some sense. It's still pretty weird, but it's not as weird. Also, shortly after claiming that he doesn't need weapons, Superman chooses to wield a ridiculous mega gun known as the Expunger. It's crazy. I just love that he's like, I don't need weapons because I have powers. I would never do that. And then like flip to like 2 pages later and he's like, look at this giant expunger, I'm gonna use this mega gun. Number 4, All-Star Batman and Robin. Not so much a story as a full series, but I have other full series on this list, so it's fine. All-Star Batman and Robin consists of 10 issues, all of which are pretty weird when it comes to the depiction and characterization of a lot of our favorite superheroes, villains, and their allies even. Once again, we get a super jacked version of Joker in this comic. We also get a version of Vicky Vale who seems far more obsessed with Superman's manhood and dates with Bruce Wayne than any kind of serious reporting. And of course, then there are Batman and Robin. What a dynamic. Batman in this comic is the worst kind of hero, an entitled one. This is the version who refers to himself as the goddamn Batman and makes Dick eat rats and sleep in the Batcave initially. Because he's Batman and he can do that. He also torments Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, by painting himself, Robin, and the entire room and corridor yellow, and also serves and consumes yellow food and drink around him, with Batman enjoying some lemonade and Robin devouring what appears to be an all yellow ice cream cone. All-Star Batman and Robin has to be one of the weirdest multiverses out there. And every time I go back to it, I'm like, what is happening? What is this characterization? Number 3, JLA created equal. Okay, so All-Star Batman and Robin is the not so great kind of weird, but JLA created equal is just the weird kind of weird. In this 2-part Elseworld story, we get a glimpse into a world where all the men, or almost all the men, were killed off by an unexpected and sudden plague. The only 2 left alive are Superman and Lex Luthor in this reality, and yet for all the powerful women who remain, this book sure manages to still be about the male characters within it. In Created Equal, Superman attempts to help the rest of the new, almost all-female JLA figure out a way to repopulate the Earth. I say almost because Superman's still there, so yeah. The main concern is how to ensure the survival of the human male gender, as if they made clones, with their technology and resources, they'd actually only be able to produce female ones. I guess they can't like tamper with the genes, they can't like tamper with the DNA, or I don't know how you make clones anyway, so I probably shouldn't tell other people how to do it. Eventually, Lois Lane and Clark Kent end up conceiving a son who is born and named Adam. He accidentally hugs his mother to death, and then Lex, being Lex, unleashes a plan to take control of all the young men who were created and raised on Themyscira, thanks to Adam's existence and his resilience. Also, he makes them all bald, because this is Lex Luthor, so yeah. Oh, what a weird story. Come and join me, and also I'll be bald, because you all have lovely hair and it offends me. Number 2, Batman Reptilian. Ah yes, the story of an alien baby that belongs to Killer Croc because he was influenced by aliens while inside his mother's womb, which is how he's even mutated and also makes him like, I guess, a hybrid alien-human creation technically. In this beautiful yet bizarre story, Batman is attempting to track down whoever is killing all of his rogues. What he finds out though is that it isn't any one of the other villains, but Croc's baby that he just gave birth to. Killer Croc, of course, didn't know that he could do that. I mean, neither did did we. It turns out that this is a result of him being part alien in origin, or being tampered with by aliens when he was like a fetus. The newborn babe, it turns out, just wants its mama, but for what purpose remains to be seen. Killer Croc can't nurture it, as you know, he doesn't have like the biological equipment for that. After we get through that whole slog of that's not gonna work, it's also implied that the giant alien monster baby wants Croc to mate with it, which is also thankfully out of the question when it comes to Croc's willingness, so thank goodness, because I thought this better not be where this is going. Oh my goodness. Did I mention that Batman is also a huge jerk throughout this entire series? Cause yeah, this is Garth Ennis behind the writing wheel, and that is very much a thing. Which I'm not surprised by. That's kind of Ennis' whole thing, so yeah. I actually like Batman being a butt in that story more than I like him being a butt in Frank Miller's All-Star, so yeah. Number 1, Batman Last Night on Earth. This one was where the thumb came from in part 1 of this list. I had intended to actually include this story there, but then I got distracted by the Batman and Lobo crossover. Understandably so, I think, because that's also super weird. But that's fine, because it just means that Last Night on Earth gets a higher spot on this list of bizarre multiversal DC stories. Batman Last Night on Earth is a book that exists outside of the continuity and belongs to the DC Black Label line. Also, Reptilian is part of that same line, just so you know. Black Label primarily is made up of titles that are more adult in terms of their content and their themes. Here, that translates to Batman wearing a straitjacket version of his suit in a post-apocalyptic future, where Joker is just a head in a jar. They also end up fighting giant monster baby Green Lantern constructs in issue number 1, just to give you a sense of the level of weird that we're dealing with here. But it's like a fun weird. It's like a, I'd recommend this weird. I give it 2 weird thumbs up. Number 10. What if the X-Men had lost Inferno? This very chaotic and fire-filled demon horde-infested story comes to us from What If Volume 2, issue number 6. And we are starting it off hot, friends. This is quite a dark story. Here we get to imagine what the fate of the world would have been like had the X-Men failed in defeating Madeline Pryor during the events of Inferno. Instead, she and Sim take over the planet Earth, unleashing hordes of demons on it and ruling it together. However, the heroes who have survived their reign of terror manage to band together and, using their power, fight back. In the end, they do win the day, but not without casualties. Wolverine himself in the story ends up becoming the pet of the Goblin Queen, and Sim fully giving into his feral rage and feeding on the innocent. Ugh. He only becomes free from the fog of his rage after he kills Kitty Pryde tragically and realizes the monster that he has become. Number 9. What if Captain America were revived today? 1983. Because there's another one of these from like, I think 1994, so yeah, but that's in volume 2. We're going to volume 1. There are actually a few different stories involving Captain America being revived in the modern day or simply evolving with time as it passed. So 1994, and I think there's also another one of them which might even be on this list. But in this What If from volume 1, issue 44, we get a darker take on what a modern day Cap could look like in the 80s. This version of the hero ends up turning America into a heavily monitored and policed country during his witch hunt for communists. Fortunately, as dark as that all is, we learn that this isn't the real Captain America but an imposter that took his place after he went MIA. The real Cap returns and battles it out with imposter Cap, but in the end, the real Captain America turns to the people of America to undo all the damage done. He asks them to take responsibility, as while they were led to this point by a false version of him, they also allowed themselves to be led falsely. It's honestly a really good speech that even today rings true in a lot of ways, at least for me, and it provides the silver lining and shining hope for an otherwise pretty dark tale. Little grains of hope, that's all we need. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want more what if lists, be sure to let us know by giving this a thumbs up, sharing it, doing all the things. Also, if you want more what if content, we do have a playlist now for that. Yay! Number 8. What if Wolverine killed the Hulk? In issue 31 of the 1977 What If series, we find out what would happen if instead, when Wolverine first met the Hulk, he had killed him. Wolverine goes on to celebrate his victory against the big green Goliath after killing him, having some drinks and throwing some punches like he usually does at the local tavern. However, in the end, things get out of hand and he accidentally kills one of the patrons in a rage. When he seeks help from the military to protect and defend him, they actually turn their back on Wolverine, and so he ends up joining the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He becomes a sleeper agent for Magneto, infiltrating the X-Men. However, when Magneto finally plans on enacting his plan to defeat and capture the X-Men, Wolverine has a change of heart, feeling as though he has truly found acceptance and a family with the mutant team of heroes. He battles Magneto one-on-one, and the two kill one another in the end. It's a pretty tragic tale. Basically, all what ifs with Wolverine I feel like are usually pretty sad. Pretty sad or pretty dark. Number 7. What if Captain America had not vanished during World War II? See, another Captain America story because I love these. This story comes to us from issue 5 of volume 1, aka the 1977 What If series. While Captain America does not get trapped in the ice and Bucky never goes missing, presumed dead, only to become brainwashed and repurposed by the Soviet Union as the Winter Soldier, a worse fate seemingly awaits both of these heroes. Neither having ever disappeared, Steve goes on to fight as Captain America until he eventually retires from the mantle, becoming instead the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Bucky ends up taking his place, becoming the new Cap, as we have also seen happen in modern comics, and Rick Jones ends up becoming Buck's new sidekick, also going by the mantle of Bucky. Because I guess Rick or Ricky just doesn't have the same zing to it? Sadly though, Cap Bucky ends up dying on a mission, and Sharon Carter, Agent 13, who had hoped to settle down with Bucky after his final mission, blames Steve for his death. She actually accuses him of robbing him of his childhood and putting him in danger. Pretty intense. And then of course it ends with Rick volunteering to become the new Cap, so the deadly cycle it seems is destined to still continue in this timeline. You'd feel like after that all happened, Steve might be like, maybe we won't do that again, it didn't go great the last time. But he's just like, ah yes, Rick Jones, now you will be Captain America and probably die. What if the Green Goblin stole the Infinity Gauntlet? This story comes to us from the What If Infinity Dark Reign one-shot. Here we see Green Goblin dealing with a lot of family drama and trauma from his past. He steals the Infinity Gauntlet and not only uses it to defeat, well, all the heroes of planet Earth and beyond, but it's also revealed that his true motivation for doing all of this and pretty much everything that he's done is to win his father's approval. His father, who was always so unimpressed and who for a long time mistreated him, pushing Norman towards greatness or else. When Norman showcases his villainous accomplishments, it only causes his father to revile him even more though. Norman then decides to use his Infinity Gauntlet to snap and influence his father, making him proud of him instead. But this makes his father's love and approval feel pretty empty, especially when Norman learns that his altered dad actually really only loves him just because he's his son, and not for all that he has accomplished. Which you would think would be really nice, but to Norman he's like, that's infuriating, I hate that. Norman erases his father from existence, and in so doing, erases himself. Don't you hate when that happens? Number 5. Marvel Zombies Resurrection. While not an exact what if series, Marvel Zombies Resurrection definitely feels like a what if version of the Marvel Zombies world that imagines a completely new scenario involving zombies based on established Marvel lore, where Galactus becomes infected with a mysterious new virus that it turns out was created by the Brood, dun dun dun, to infect people more efficiently, turning them instead into zombies. The whole series from 2020 and the intro to it from 2019 that kind of explains all of the lore that you need to know to jump in is all pretty bleak, with only a few people on Earth making it out alive in the end, and still fighting basically just to survive after the world has pretty much been completely infected after Galactus' corpse is hurled to the Earth to be used as a kind of zombie creating bomb. But while the story is pretty dark in terms of all the great heroes that we lose, do not worry. At least Carol's Flurkin cat Chewie stays safe. Thank goodness. In case like me you read this and you were worried the whole time about that little fur baby, I was like, no, please don't let Chewie die, Chewie's so cute. Chewie is also a badass, so really there's no need to worry. Chewie's like one of the best fighters in this entire series, which I love. Number 4. What if Clint Barton killed Norman Osborn during Dark Reign? This what if comes answered in the What If Dark Reign one-shot. Here we get to see what could have happened had Clint Barton's plan to kill Norman Osborn actually come together. Clint himself ends up making a martyr out of Osborn though, unfortunately, and becomes a wanted man in the process. One civilian decides to take the matter of justice into his own hands, calling out the assassin, Clint Francis Barton. important, and if he doesn't show himself, he threatens to blow up the entire Sunday Inn and all the innocent people that are inside it. Hawkeye does show up though, and attempts to talk the man down, but surprisingly, the man pulls a gun and shoots Clint point blank to death, rather than surrender. He is taken away, and in the end, Hammer remains in control under Deputy Director, likely now full director actually, Victoria Hand. Basically, if Hawkeye had actually killed Norman Osborn, it would be bad, I think, in the long run. I think that's what we learned. Number 3. What If the Kingdom of Kane? In What If issue 94 out of the 1989 series, also known as Volume 2, we get to visit a world destroyed by the Sentinels. Oh goody. The Sentinels did not only take out all of mutant kind supposedly, but also killed all of Earth's mightiest heroes besides, and its general population of non-powered individuals who were killed by high levels of radiation that the Sentinels emitted. The only one to survive all this destruction is Juggernaut, who wanders the Earth for years reminiscing on his past and all of his wrongdoings, and feeling unbearably lonely all the while. Poor Juggernaut. Magneto shows up and confirms that everything that has come to pass is Juggernaut's fault because he killed Professor X, which was basically the catalyst event for this chain reaction of destruction that has now come to pass. Juggernaut finds and kind of falls into a secret bunker as a result of his fight with Magneto, where he learns that some mutants survived and are actually hiding out. Yay! When they ask him to leave them be though, he refuses, only to learn that this was an attempt to protect themselves against the radiation, which he is now let in by breaking into the bunker, infecting them and ultimately sentencing them to death. So, it's really sad. Juggernaut's like, I'm lonely, I just want to talk to you. And they're just like, you just killed us, so thanks for that. He's like, wow. I ruin everything, this is terrible. Number 2. What If the Traitor? In this alternate tale that comes to us from the 1989 volume of What If issue -1, we get to see what would happen if Trevor Fitzroy went back in time to try and convince Professor X to never create the X-Men. Although Bishop travels back in time to try and stop Fitzroy, it doesn't end up working out. Fitzroy shows the Professor of the future to come and all the war and prosecution that mutants will suffer. When Professor X meets Bishop, he inquires of Jean's fate and learns that she perishes, but that he and his X-Men remain a symbol of hope for the people. Unable to accept the dark future that awaits, however, Professor X seemingly agrees, despite Bishop's pleas, to never let the X-Men form, and Bishop ends up being locked up in prison in the past, with both Fitzroy and Bishop believing the other is the traitor. But who's really the traitor? Number 1. What If Spider-Man Back in Black? This story reimagines what would have happened had MJ ended up being shot by the Kingpin's hitman instead of Aunt May. Mary Jane as such does not end up in intensive care hanging to life by a thread, but instead dies pretty much instantly. This makes Peter lose control, going into a dark rage unlike any we've ever seen. He doesn't just plan on scaring and potentially finishing the Kingpin if MJ dies, because I mean she's already dead, but instead he plans on just straight up setting out to kill whoever was responsible for the hit, which he of course does find out was still Kingpin in this reality. Donning his black costume, he heads out planning to put an end to Kingpin once and for all, despite Aunt May and Iron Man trying to stop him and calm him down. In the end, Peter succeeds in killing Kingpin, Aunt May basically disowns him, and Iron Man has him arrested for murder, citing the Superhero Registration Act. Peter blames Iron Man for all this mess, by the way, demanding a trial with a jury, and Iron Man denies any wrongdoing, claiming Peter made his choice.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Thor and Jane Foster. The God of Thunder from Down Under and Jane Foster. Now, we see this relationship in the MCU, not that much though. See, it's said in the beginning of Thor Ragnarok that they broke up, so already this relationship in the MCU is pretty rocky. But now with Natalie Portman confirmed for Thor Love and Thunder next year, we may even go a bit darker with their romance. See, in the comics, their relationship began in the 60s when readers were introduced to Jane. She attended med school and was soon hired by Dr. Donald Blake, who was actually Thor in disguise. They're the king and queen of long distance. I mean, one lives on Earth, the other lives on Asgard, and at one point Jane actually takes over and becomes the God of Thunder at a time where Thor was unworthy of wielding Mjolnir. Her time as Thor is pretty exciting, but the only catch was that her cancer would worsen every time she used her powers to save the day. So let's just hope we don't have to endure that on the big screen, because the comics was hard enough. That was way too sad. And before we go on to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and toss this video a like, because it really helps the channel out quite a bit. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to some dark Marvel romances. Number 9, Crystal and the Human Torch. In Fantastic Four issue 45, Johnny Flame and Crystal meet and they hit it off. Naturally, being, Johnny saw her and immediately thought that she was something out of a fairy tale. How cute. So he approached her, and of course this spooked her, causing this giant gust of wind, a quick storm, and then poof, she was gone, nowhere to be seen. Johnny is like, what the blazes was that? Why is she gone? How did this happen? Mysteries, mysteries. A few pages later, he runs into her again, but this time they show each other their superpowers, and that makes them instantly bond. The Fantastic Four needed a replacement temporarily while Sue was recovering from having their first child. So this Inhuman, Crystal, was looking to fill that spot. Johnny and her were close. They dated after this, and then Crystal was front cover by time Fantastic Four issue 81 rolled around. And then in Avengers issue 104, after a battle with a Sentinel, Quicksilver is hurt. The two of them ended up getting close as well, maybe a bit too close, because then she fell in love with Pietro. Sorry, Johnny, just not hot enough this time, it seems. Number 8, Crystal and Quicksilver. It happens, okay? Maybe you're with somebody, you meet another person, you just can't help it. Love is love. You gotta chase those feelings. It's not easy. So when it comes to Quicksilver, chasing doesn't take that long, being super fast and all. Crystal and Johnny broke up after she admitted to falling in love with Pietro, and then they got married. Now this sounds like Johnny is the only one who got hurt here, but that's not the case for long. Crystal and Pietro's marriage was the first between an Inhuman and a human in history, so it was kind of a big deal. They ended up having a daughter who surprisingly was born without any powers, and they named her Luna after the world that she was born on. Quicksilver believed that he had the right to subject the child to the Terrigen Mist, but Crystal wanted her to grow up normal. So their marriage now began to spiral. Quicksilver's temper was ruining things, and Crystal had an affair with another man named Norm Webster. She told Quicksilver while she was unwell and half asleep. It was wild. Funny enough, Norm was actually the same guy who sold to Vision and Scarlet Witch their home in Vision and Scarlet Witch issue 1, volume 2. Once Norman found out that Crystal was married, he was like, nah, I'm out of here. I'm bouncing. See ya. Crystal then left Quicksilver with Luna and then returned to the Fantastic Four, searching for that relationship with Johnny again. What a mess. What an absolute mess. Number 7, Thor and Lady Sif. This next one, okay, I think this will be a central plot for the next Thor movie, perhaps. When it comes to Norse mythology, Thor's wife is Lady Sif. In the comics, it's not that easy. See, they were on and off for a while, and we see glimpses of this in the MCU. With Lady Sif's absence in Ragnarok, fans can expect her to return into Thor's life, kind of like Bo Peep in Toy Story 4. She's still around, she's just not around here right now, per se. In Journey into Mystery, issue 102, Thor had fallen in love with Lady Sif, so much so that when Sif had been kidnapped by storm giants and ended up as a prisoner of Hela, Thor straight up offered his own life in order to save hers. And Hela was so impressed that she let them both go. She was like, wow, go make out, go do something, that's great, you guys are great. And then in Thor 236, Lady Sif sacrificed her own life in order to save Jane's. Now, while this may seem like a rather dark plot, I'm sure we'll get some sort of version in it in the next Thor movie. Maybe the reality gem has caused some life-altering effects to Jane, and Lady Sif can somehow be the only one to save her at the end of the movie. Number 6, Black Widow and Bruce Banner. Remember in Age of Ultron when Black Widow was the key to calming Bruce Banner down? They were in love, probably. I mean, I think, maybe? I mean, they were flirting at the beginning of Age of Ultron. Even Steve Rogers was like, hey, you're not breaking any bylaws, go for it. I insist. And then cut to later in the movie, they're at Clint's secret family farmhouse talking about running away together. And then after all this time, Bruce finally returns to Earth in Infinity War, and he says hi to Nat, and then she says hi back, and that's kind of it. Well, according to Infinity War co-screenwriter Stephen McFeely, he said they certainly tried to, but it became very clear that if the scene was just not the A-plot of the movie, it couldn't survive Infinity War. He said that thing has to be on rails just to get to the finish line. He said you couldn't wrap up loose threads just because you wanted to. That's a valid point, but when Natasha sacrifices her life in order to allow Hawkeye to get the Soul Stone, Banner just like throws a bench. I mean, I was seriously expecting more heartbreak from him. I was actually expecting him to kind of Hulk out a bit, but no, he wears cardigans now, so he's all good. Number 5, Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy. This one left average moviegoers stunned in theaters when The Amazing Spider-Man 2 hit the big screen. We see the famous death of Gwen Stacy from the comics on the screen, and it's So sad. God, it's so sad. This horrible moment comes from issue 121 of The Amazing Spider-Man, where the Green Goblin drops her off the Brooklyn Bridge, and although Peter has his trusty webs, sometimes the angle just doesn't cut it, and then he caught her the wrong way, and Gwen Stacy's neck ended up snapping from the momentum. Eagle Eye fans could spot the clock tower in Amazing Spider-Man 2 striking 12:10, which references that of issue 121. Number 4, Black Panther and Monica Lynn. Monica first appeared in comics back in Avengers issue 73. She grew up in Georgia but moved to New York, where she then met Black Panther. T'Challa saved Lynn from the Sons of the Serpent, and usually when there's saving involved, loving comes after. They hit it off, so much so that Monica actually lived in Wakanda with her prince as well. In Black Panther, Panther's Prey issue 4, he calls off the engagement without giving an explanation why. But then in Black Panther volume 4, issue 16, Monica Lynn is seen performing. She's a great singer in the comics, and she sings a sad love song to a sold-out crowd in Washington, D.C. Through her lyrics, she reflects on her heartbreak and the fact that T'Challa is marrying someone else. He actually ends up marrying Storm. Wow, what an artist. She turns her pain into passion. She's like Adele, but better. Number 3, Jean Grey and Scott Summers. Cyclops and Jean Grey became close in the school for gifted youngsters after Scott was given a visor made of ruby quartz. He could then control his powers and shortly became the deputy leader of the X-Men, and then of course fell in love with his teammate, the wonderful Jean Grey. Sounds like a dream when it comes to the gifted youngsters, no? I mean, they're super close, and of course their romance was a fan favorite. She's in his head as well. I mean that in a literal sense. Jean created a psychic link between them both, giving them the ability to read each other's minds. Guys, just a pause right there. Would you ever want that with your significant other? Would you ever want like your brains to be linked and you know what each other's thinking about? I mean, that's trust. That's a lot of trust. I can't tell if I would hate that or love that. They went strong until Jean sacrificed herself to save everybody from the Dark Phoenix in X-Men 137. And Scott would surely take his time moving on until he married Madeline Pryor, of course. Number 2, Vision and Scarlet Witch. Perhaps one of the most interesting couples in the MCU, and especially after the events of WandaVision have just unfolded last week, it's fair to say that this deserves a spot on the list as well. He's an android and she's a witch, and they go through a lot together. So Vision and Wanda tied the knot back in 1974, and they've even welcomed twins at one point. Catch was, those twins of Wanda and Visions came out of nowhere, and it was then revealed that their souls were actually part of Mephisto, which was actually a running theory in WandaVision for a while, but that might have been too dark for the show, which makes sense. So these twins have been in the comics to grow up to become Wiccan and Speed, and in the MCU, Wanda and Vision's romance is super fun to watch for the most part. I mean, they joke and bond over paprika, they watch sitcoms, and they have incredibly deep conversations about love. They both got their abilities from the same Infinity Stone in the MCU, so they're literally connected in a way. In the finale of WandaVision, she says goodbye yet again to her love, and this time it's on their terms. Now with the other White Vision being free, and he's basically another version of that same Vision, odds are it's going to be even more heartbreaking once Wanda leans into this villain role in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and they yet again have to say goodbye for like the 4th time. I've lost count at this point. And finally, number 1, Tony Stark and Pepper Potts. When it comes to character arcs in the MCU, Endgame did a really good job of wrapping storylines up for most of our characters. I mean, Black Widow for sure could have used a funeral, but I mean, her solo movie is coming up, so maybe we'll see more of that then. But when it comes to Tony Stark and Pepper Potts, she used to work for him, answering his calls, watching him tinker around in the basement, building Mark II. They had their ups and downs throughout the years. Like in Civil War, Tony and Pepper were separated, and then at the end of Homecoming, Tony pops out an engagement ring, and then things come to a tragic end, of course, when Tony sacrifices his life in order to wipe out Thanos and his army. Of course, repeating the same words that kicked off this entire thing in the first place, those being, "I am Iron Man." So now with Pepper being more than capable of suiting up herself and helping out in the battle, could we see more of her in the MCU, perhaps in her Iron Man suit? Probably not, it doesn't seem like we will, but hopefully, time will tell. Fingers crossed.
Number 10, Hawkeye kills Black Widow. We tend to talk a lot on Top 10 Nerd about one of the darkest areas of Marvel's comic lines and alternate worlds, the Ultimates, the Earth of 1610. In this reality, Black Widow becomes a villain after betraying Tony Stark. While her betrayal of Iron Man and her fellow teammates is a dark enough story, we're going to talk about what happens after the betrayal that we all tend to focus on more. Hawkeye ends up being betrayed by Natasha as well. His entire family is slaughtered because of her, and he is taken in, questioned, and tortured. Brutally brutally tortured. Because in the Ultimates reality, he actually has a family, similar to the one that you actually see in the MCU. Clint impressively escapes his captors using only his detached fingernails as weaponized projectiles to take them out. He then hunts down Natasha, who was incapacitated by Tony and is in the hospital. Hawkeye kills her with an arrow to the head, but only after he pins her hands to the walls with arrows. Youch. The whole thing is pretty dark. Number 9. Cyclops eliminates Professor X. There was a time when Professor X was seen as a full-fledged hero, a brilliant man with a desire only to see and create harmony and equality in the world. Isn't that nice? Since his introduction, however, more and more seeds of doubt kept cropping up when it came to his methods in terms of training his X-Men and attempting to achieve his lofty goals. By the time the Phoenix Five had come about, many mutants and readers were divided on just how heroic and good Professor X really was. Still, when Cyclops, in a Phoenix-induced rage, was approached by Xavier, who tried to reason with Scott and calm him down as his sort of father figure and mentor, we all suspected Scott would listen. Instead, Scott completely obliterated Professor Xavier, and regardless of your mixed feelings about Professor X, the scene was pretty tragic. Even Scott admitted, despite being under the influence of the Phoenix Force, that he had done wrong, and even agreed that he should atone for the murder. Granted, this wasn't the first time Professor X had died, but it was one of his darkest deaths, being killed by one of his most prized students. Number 8. Deadpool kills his parents. Wade Wilson, being an insane mercenary and former assassin, is of course one of the darker characters Marvel has to offer. And yet even Deadpool for the most part manages to keep things pretty humorous and light. This is a dude who refers to all vampires as Draculas. This is a hero who is so insane it's basically humorous, and who uses jokes to likely mask his own pain. But despite being a regular comedian, Deadpool has gone through some pretty dark and crazy times, and done and seen some pretty crazy stuff. One such dark adventure of his was during the time he was brainwashed by Butler into killing his parents. Deadpool of course did not know who they were. He appears to recognize items in the house like an old baseball glove that perhaps once belonged to him in another life, but a job's a job, he reasons. He dismisses his gut instinct and burns the house to the ground while his parents are asleep upstairs, completely unaware of course that they are his parents. Even Sabretooth feels bad about this incident. Number 7. Really close brother-sister relationship. Scarlet Witch and her brother Quicksilver have always been close in the comics, but one series in alternate reality took their relationship a little too far. The Wanda Maximoff of Earth 1610, the Ultimates reality, has an even closer relationship, and creepier one, with her brother it seems. In Ultimates 3, writer Jeff Loeb decided to confirm that their flirtations were, well, more than that, and that brother and sister were actually in a romantic and very physical relationship with one another. Even more dark and disturbing, Pietro also compliments his sister on how she looks more and more like their mother every day before getting it on with her. Brings a whole new meaning to the phrase keeping it in the family. Ick. Number 6. Death of Daken. Last issues of comic series often tend to be the most epic, and for 2010's Uncanny X-Force, that expectation held true. Although the climax of the story ended up being a lot more tragic and dark than happy and celebratory. Daken ends up being manipulated by Sabretooth, who proves here how much of a master strategist he can be when it leads to Wolverine being forced to take out Daken, drowning him in a puddle. Wolverine holds back during the beginning of the fight, feeling the weight of what he knows he must do, and when he does end up striking out full force, it's Daken's dreams and thoughts we see in between panels of his father drowning him. Daken imagines what life being raised by Logan, being a family unit, would be like. It's heart-wrenching. And afterwards, Sabretooth is there to gloat and reveal that Wolverine killing Daken was all because of his machinations. Just another way, maybe one of the worst ways, that Sabretooth has wounded Logan over the years. Such a well-written, such a sad story, ugh. Number 5. Old Man Logan. One of the bleakest series to come out of Marvel. Old Man Logan as a character is from the alternate universe of Earth 807128, an alternate world where supervillains won against all the superheroes. This version of the character was created by Mark Miller and Steve McNiven, and has received 2 of his own series, which started out being written by Brian Michael Bendis with art by Andrea Sorrentino. The first run is not just dark in terms of its setting, but the pencils and colors also perfectly match the tone of Old Man Logan, a violent, post-apocalyptic world where Logan finds himself constantly haunted by the ghosts of his past. Dun dun dun. Ghosts. Number 4, Zombieverse. Another alternate world, and in this case slew of series, that managed to be even darker than Old Man Logan belong to the place we refer to as the Zombieverse, or the alternate Earth of 2149. Here all of your favorite heroes have died or been replaced by zombies, or likely a little bit of both. This reality is where we saw Spider-Man eat Aunt May and MJ, unable to stop himself from killing them. We also see She-Hulk eat Valerian, Franklin Richards, the children of her teammates and friends from the Fantastic Four. It's also the alternate world where Hank Pym's Ant-Man keeps Black Panther alive so he can slowly saw off pieces of him and eat them while they're fresh to satiate his hunger. Ugh, the Zombieverse it's really something else. I have to go there so often and I'm just like, man, sometimes I wish I could just not go there. Number 3, Hydra Cap. Captain America is known for being one of the most good, most noble characters that Marvel has. He's kind of like Marvel's Superman when it comes to ideals. He stands for liberty, freedom, and justice. He's got a bit of a classic honesty to him as well, being a hero sort of launched out of time or displaced out of time. So it shocked everyone when it was revealed that he was a long-time sleeper agent for Hydra, dun dun dun, and had been playing us this whole time. Of course, he hadn't. Well, he had, but it wasn't necessarily by choice. Reality had been altered when an organic, child-appearing version of the cosmic cube, known as Kobik, was influenced by Red Skull, and then attempted to revive a dying Steve Rogers, turning him into, you know, the Steve Rogers that we had when he was part of Hydra. Alternate Steve Rogers. Number 2, we're in the endgame now. When Thanos was revealed to be the biggest bad that the Marvel Cinematic Universe had yet to face, the supervillain who'd been plotting in the background of the film since almost the beginning, we were all pretty confident that all of our heroes united could take him down, right? If not, we were waiting for the teased-at Adam Warlock to appear out of the sky and Deus Ex Machina us out of this mess. But in the Avengers film Infinity War, that is not what happened. Instead, Thanos showed up and with the help of his goon squad, the Black Order, ended up managing to defeat Earth's mightiest heroes and get his hands on the Infinity Stones. Thor arrived just in time to stop him, but keeping things PG with his aim and targeting Thanos' chest instead of his head, well, that would come back to haunt him. Thanos managed to also defeat Thor and snap 50% of the universe out of existence, giving us some of the darkest times our heroes had seen yet, and some of the saddest death scenes in the MCU when we lost teenage Groot and Peter Parker. Sad. Number 1, Ruins. This 2-part miniseries is from 1995 and it is probably the darkest reimagining of Marvel's main continuity. In Ruins, superheroes still exist, but superpowers often come with disastrous consequences and side effects. Cannot stop his limbs from uncontrollably shaking, apparently. We see this reality's version of him referred to as Quickie being kept in a mutant prison. He has had all of his limbs amputated for his own good, so they claim. But you know, it's Wilson Fisk as a prison guard, so probably can't trust that. In Ruins, Wolverine has also had to suffer as a result of his powers. His skin is falling off as a result of adamantium poisoning his body from the inside out. Bruce Banner's gamma radiation, instead of transforming him into the Hulk, simply causes his body to sprout many large green tumors, causing him to swell until he explodes.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Bucky's death. Of course, why not start at the beginning after all? So, near the end of World War II, Bucky and Cap were trying to disarm a bomb on a plane while taking down Baron Zemo in the meantime. The bomb went off, hurling Steve Rogers and Bucky into freezing cold waters. And for Cap, well, he came out of this pretty easy, as we all know. He remained frozen, just hanging out. Bucky though, good old trusty sidekick Buck, Bucky wasn't so lucky after all. His body fell into the freezing waters, and at the time, a Soviet spy submarine was in the area crossing the English Channel, so they scooped him up. Why not? It's like Alaskan crab fishermen, but with, you know, assassins. So they fixed him up a fancy new metal arm, brainwashed him, and turned him into a brutal assassin. He has all these incredible abilities that make him a fierce fighter, but he doesn't remember how he knows these things, making him a deadly assassin and a pretty badass villain. Now this is Steve Rogers' right-hand man. One of the biggest turning points of Marvel was the introduction of the Winter Soldier. And this was also a conflict that came to life on the big screen back in 2014, and we're still watching Bucky try and weave his way through all this drama and past. It's not an easy road for the guy. Poor Buck. Yeah, it's never been easy for him. You feel bad for him. And before we go on to number 9, guys, if you could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, because it really does a lot over for us at our channel. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now let's keep going with this crazy list. Number 9. Red Room training. Natasha Romanova. She was trained in the Red Room since she was young, and amongst one of those leading forces of her training was the Winter Soldier. He's one of the best, so it makes sense that he passes on his skills. So Natasha was part of the Black Widow Ops program, and then he would come in and help her with combat training, while also handling the Wolf Spider Ops program. So they worked together a bit. They were all training under this big, bad roof. They even had a thing for each other briefly until he was deemed unstable and put back under cryostasis. That's gotta suck though, right? Whenever you're not being used, they're like, awesome, go clean that, and then you're frozen again until we need you in 50 years. Number 8, Jasper Sitwell. He posed as a high-ranking SHIELD agent in the MCU when in actuality he was a Hydra infiltrator. Played by Maximiliano Hernandez, Jasper Sitwell was trained at the Hydra Preparatory Academy. And he's been in Marvel movies for a while now, starting with Thor back in 2011 as just a SHIELD agent. So he met his brutal fate in Captain America Winter Soldier when Bucky straight up threw him out of a car. It was so fast, scared the life out of me in the theaters. Now this happens of course when SHIELD is compromised and all of the shady agents are called out for double dipping into Hydra. So Cap, Black Widow, and Falcon are driving Jasper Sitwell to base in order to use him as a path through the security, and he's in the middle of explaining how this plan is a horrible idea, and before he can even finish, the Winter Soldier finishes him. Before the Winter Soldier's arm comes out of nowhere and then tosses him out, interrupting him. It's great. Number 7, Stiltman. Stiltman, okay, now he may not be the coolest villain by any means, and this is coming from a guy who basically is a Stiltman himself. I mean, I'm a tall dude, it's tough. You bump your head on stuff a lot, you gotta kind of duck. I have back problems now because I duck too much. That's the life of a Stiltman. It's not easy. Now in Civil War, the villain was killed by the Punisher, but in What If House of M, we see him still hanging out with some other villains, like Shocker and Trapster. And then the Winter Soldier takes him out in one single page. It's so easy to miss. So right now, Stiltman is still kicking around in the main continuity. He was resurrected in 2017. So let's just hope the Winter Soldier is the one to take him out again. I mean, after all, it was done so quick. I mean, probably didn't feel much. I'm sure a good amount of people would miss this while they were reading this What If comic. It happened so fast. That's how precise Bucky is. One shot, and you're done. Number 6, Jack Monroe. He made his debut in Young Men issue 24. Now, Jack had a rough upbringing. His parents weren't the greatest by any means, and he grew up idolizing Captain America and his partner Bucky. Now, this is around 1953, right? He looked up to Bucky so much that he started referring to himself as Bucky. And when he attended school, he was taught by William Burnside, who had changed his name to Steve Rogers, and then he even got some work done on his face to match the look. Talk about a fan. So he ended up developing another Captain America serum, and he and Jack tried to be the new Bucky and Cap. Sounds like the dream team. That sounds great. So they got enhanced abilities and they took down Red Skull. They did some good work. The only thing was, a year later, things started to turn. Things started to go wrong. Yeah, they started to become paranoid schizophrenics from the serum, so the government had to put them in cryogenic suspension. Now, when they were discovered in the modern age, Jack then would go after Cap, Cap would win, and then put him back in the ice. Jack in the ice, that's some Titanic stuff right there. Eventually, after rehab, Jack was allowed to be free. So then we find at the end of Captain America issue 3, volume 5, we find him at a bar where he's drinking and he doesn't look too good. So as he's leaving this bar, he hears a voice call out to him, and then he's shot and then put in the back of a car. Who did he get shot by? Well, the Winter Soldier himself, the guy he idolized. And if you think that's bad, things only somehow got worse involving Jack Monroe, the whole bomb situation, which I'll get into a little later. Number 5, Itsu Akihiro. So last video I did was on the many romances of Wolverine, and most of the ladies in Logan's life end up meeting a dark and cruel fate, like Itsu Akihiro, the woman Logan met while he was in Japan after World War II. She was living in Jasmine Falls and met Logan during his 4th year of training with Bando Saburo, who at the time was teaching him how to be a man and leave the warrior nature in his past. Now the two had fallen in love at this point, and shortly after she was expecting a baby. So one day Logan was proving himself worthy of being a man, and more importantly as a father, during a combat exercise. And then an explosion caught him off guard and one of his claws popped out and he accidentally stabbed a villager. And then he was banned from the village. So then he went to go say goodbye to Itsu in their home and he found her dead. Now who's to blame here but again the Winter Soldier. Yep, he was acting under Romulus's order in order to get Logan out of hiding and back to Madripoor. And let's just say, the plan kind of worked. Number 4, Tony Stark's parents. Civil War is one of my favorite Marvel movies to watch, especially when these guys finally battle it out, because there's years of history behind it. It's not just a random thing that pops up and they're like, hey, let's fight. This is a real conflict. Captain America Civil War was released in 2016, directed again by the Russo brothers, and the whole movie is politics. It's superhero politics, like in the comic, minus, the kids getting blown up at the beginning of the comic. We're gonna leave that part out. But in the film adaptation, Tony sides with the government in the Sokovia Accords. He feels responsible for the deaths, especially one of Charles Spencer at the end of Age of Ultron. And Steve, he just wants to protect Bucky. He knows that he's brainwashed, and freedom throughout the team certainly wouldn't hurt as well. Now eventually, due to Baron Zemo's sneaky little work, he gets Tony in the same room as Steve, and then it's revealed. The true reason behind Zemo's plans with the Winter Soldier was to break apart the Avengers by showing Stark footage of a brainwashed Bucky assassinate Tony's parents. And he did it in order to steal the super soldier serum, so he took out his parents and then made other super soldiers. This should count as like a twofer right here. It's a pretty wild moment. It's super dark, probably the darkest that the MCU is going in terms of like actual death and human conflict. And then the next 10 minutes in that movie were treated to Tony just trying to take out Bucky for what he did, while Steve intervenes trying to keep it cool. And then we all know where that ended up. So yeah, Bucky was kind of the reason for most of the Avengers to break up. Should be number 1, there we go. Number 3, Mother Night. Susan Scarborough made her comic book debut in Captain America issue 123. So Susan and her brother were stage hypnotists who turned to crime, which I feel like more supervillains should definitely do. Hey, if you can do magic or anything like that, for sure be a villain. If you can make something disappear, you've done it. You're now a villain. Congratulations. So yeah, they used hypnotism to put together an army. I already love these guys, awesome. So she would take over gangs with hypnotism, which sounds like the funniest thing ever. And of course, at one point she tried to turn over S.H.I.E.L.D. and take control. But luckily, Captain America wasn't gonna let her little magic hypnotist trick work. No. So soon she became known as Mother Night, which sounds cooler, definitely. And she started working her way up and got close to the Red Skull. She liked him. He didn't like her, not like that, There was no hypnotism that was turning his heart this time. Then in part 3 of Captain America Out of Time, Union Jack finds the Red Skull men in the London Underground not alive, and one of those bodies, amongst them, was Mother Night. It was of course revealed that this was the doings of the Winter Soldier after the fact, and in order to show how dangerous this villain was, he needed to take out this hypnotist villain that has been around for 30 years. 30 years, and then it's like, hey, Bucky took him out. I lied. Number 2, Neil Tapper. This all goes down in issue 6 of Captain America, or part 6 of the Out of Time storyline. So Neil Tapper, right, he was an agent at S.H.I.E.L.D. who had a fling going on with Sharon Carter. Then they split up and Sharon went missing in Philadelphia during a mission to find Jack Monroe. Yeah, this is the same Jack Monroe that I said up there. It's got a lot of layers to it. So Neil Tapper and Nick Fury weren't getting along at this point. Neil thought that Nick wasn't doing a good job with handling Carter's disappearance, and then Fury, being Fury, gave him a stern talk, and then he joined in on the search in Philadelphia. So Sharon was found by Cap. She was with a group of bad guys, which there was also a bomb involved there. So Neil tried to deactivate the bomb, but it went off anyways. This whole bomb, this Bucky bomb thing, it's like no matter where you go, this guy's gonna be the cause of your death. And number 1, President JFK. Why, of course, this should be number 1. So in the Days Gone By storyline, the end of Volume 5 of Captain America, he recalls those Winter Soldier years as the dark days, a time where there were no birthdays, just a lot of death and killing. Too much to ever forget, is what he says. Now, amongst those that he took out, it was suggested that he took out the 35th President of the United States, which is a pretty big name to go for. So the Soviets send their top ghost assassin to disrupt global politics. Even in the MCU, this is the same. Even the actor that plays Bucky Barnes, Sebastian Stan, has said in an interview how much Steve can forget Bucky, mentioning that Steve was cool with the fact that Soviets have had his best friend brainwashed and then forced to take out the president. He's like, yeah, that's cool. It wasn't really him. He was just kind of, backseat. He actually returned as a zombie amongst other zombified US presidents, which is just insane, the fact that they do this in comics. I don't think we'll be getting that what if episode with the zombie stuff. I don't think JFK is going to come back in the zombie episode that they're bringing. Because if they do, I think they would get canceled pretty quick. I don't know.